An old Marine colonel at the VA told me that I was going to be stuck with these demons inside forever that I came back with. And it wasn't weeks later when I said, wait a second, I don't have to accept that. And as a matter of fact, I reject it. And so I made a decision that day that I was going to thrive with post-traumatic stress. And I was also going to stop calling it a disorder because I don't have a disorder anymore.
Hello and welcome to the March or Die show today. Very glad to have you with me. This is the show where I do my best every single episode to give you both the perspectives and the principles you need to march when it would be easier to stay where you are and die. We talk about that a lot, but you need to march. And as our guest today will say, just take that next step. Very glad to have you joining me and looking forward to our episode today. If you have not yet subscribed, go ahead and do that right now, wherever you're listening from or watching from. Go ahead and subscribe, and that would be fantastic. Today's guest is someone that I've just recently, over the last couple of weeks, become acquainted with. He was connected to me, or we were connected through a mutual friend. And man, I'm so glad that we were. Adam Kasix is our guest. And Adam is a trauma nurse, has been a trauma nurse. You'll hear his story today. He served in the United States Army, husband, father, and now serves as a coach, consultant, and really, as he would say, and he wears a t-shirt today in this episode, a hope dealer. And he helps folks move forward. That's what we talk about on this show. And so I was very glad to get connected to him. And then we talked and it was awesome. And I wanted to get this episode out. And so we recorded today to get this episode out to you. And I know it's going to be a great help to you. Now, if you're listening and not watching, then just disregard what I'm about to say. But if you're watching on YouTube or watching a clip of this, we had so many, Adam and I both had so many challenges. I had camera issues I was trying to figure out. And so I ended up using my webcam instead of my normal studio camera. And then about halfway through, Adam had to switch over to his webcam. So we had some visual issues. You may see that. But that's just how it goes sometimes. And I didn't want to wait to do this episode. I thought it was important to have this conversation and to get this out to you. And so, man, if you're watching, thank you for doing that. We'll look a little bit different. If you're not watching, you need to go to YouTube and you can find other great content there as well. But without further ado, my interview with today's guest, Adam Kasix. Adam, thank you for joining me, man. Looking forward to this. I've been looking forward to it for a while.
What's up, Jeremy? I'm really excited for this one.
We had a good conversation, I think last week, and I decided during that conversation, I wanted to have this conversation as soon as possible. And so in spite of scheduling challenges and technology challenges and the rest of it, man, I'm really excited to talk to you. So thanks for making time for us.
The honor is humbling.
So Adam, let's just kind of start from the beginning. Tell your story. And I want that to then get to, who you are now, what you do now. And I think your story obviously is the reason you're doing what you're doing now, right? And that's for most of us. But just tell us your story. How'd you get to where you are right now?
Yeah, and if God hadn't done what he had done, I wouldn't have a story to tell other than a tragic one, right? And it would have been brief.
Yeah.
So, the way that I write about it is the fact that I was a born dreamer, born to blue collar. And that was it. So God put some kind of serendipity in my soul from early. I wasn't raised around anything remotely, let's say, authentic to Jesus, right? And yet in the heart of Detroit, to this bike gang leader guy and the young girl that he swooped up out of there, who gave birth to me at 19, I was raised by people who did the best they could from what they saw, which wasn't a lot. Right. And that I went through the normal role of we escape the city, we get into the suburbs, I play hockey, normal teenage kind of coming of age. And what happened was that I started thinking around my teenage years, I want to live like this big, beautiful life that I don't see the people around me doing. I started having this awareness around 14 that, like, the way a 14-year-old gets their attitude, I'm saying, man, I don't know, but you guys always seem unhappy and whatever you're doing seems to be broken. And my mom had an opinion on that, and she let me know that one day I'd grow up. This whole story is in the book, whatever. But right. I just said, whatever I do, I'm not going to be miserable in my life. I'm going to do what makes me happy in all my 14-year-old naiveness, but the heart was pure about it.
Yeah.
And so but it was like when it was time that I wanted to go play for Little Caesars Premier Travel on the way to the Detroit Red Wings so I could be defense, play for those guys. That didn't happen at all. Dad said, get your head out of the clouds, go get a real job. And so I humorously but honestly say, instead of playing for Little Caesars on my way to the Red Wings, I ended up making Little Caesars for pizza on a Friday night in the local town. And that's true. It's a totally true story. And so I grew up with all this angst. So I go and I actually joined the military at 17. And from there, Kosovo and Bosnia was going on in the late 90s. And that fired me up. And I didn't know why, but I just, I walked in the recruiter's office and I actually joined the Marines first. So I was on my track to be a devil dog. And the guy said, why do you want to join the military? And I said, because I want to kill bad people. Like, that is it. I saw glory with Denzel Washington and Morgan Freeman, Civil War era. My grandfather was on Omaha Beach. And I'm like, that's my whole story right there. I want to join and kill bad guys.
Yeah.
But so I go and do that. And in there, I got my nursing class or my nursing school done. And then I got to take my state boards. It's an old program the Army used to have because at last minute I switched. I wasn't tough enough for Marines. I went Army, and I'll talk the nonsense.
That's the joke we always tell, right? What's the one thing that Marines and soldiers have in common? We all wanted to be Marines at some point in our lives.
There you go. So, I know the room.
That's all right. You got an education, which you probably would not have in the Marine Corps. So good call.
That is right. And somehow I had the foresight at 17, probably God's preeminent grace coming into my life going, hey, let's go get you into nursing because you got a whole life to mess up in the future. Yeah. So we did that, right? Yeah. But this is what I realized. I got into this spot where I loved the job. I became a trauma nurse, level 1, working in Detroit. Absolutely loved it. I was a reservist by then. By the time 01 happened, I just went into the reserves, and then 9/11 happens. But I was in this position where I loved the work, but I didn't like anything else about the environment of managed care, hospital administration, having a manager crack you. They tell you every day when you're hungry, a lot like the Army, or the military.
Yeah.
And so that was not rested well in my soul. And that's when I started realizing. So this took many, many years, but the coined little phrase I think that God gave me so I can give to others that will hopefully make some sense out of, let's say you felt like you were born or raised up in an environment that you weren't meant for. Maybe you were a plant in the wrong garden, right? And because I felt that way a lot in my life. And there was this sense of why I realized that as a nurse, I start getting depressed and then I start I'm married. As soon as we found out we got our first kid, we're pregnant with our first child, was the moment that everything in me, I think it broke. I think something snapped. And so the way I like to put it is I'm an intense personality. I'm wired with a lot of natural passion. And I went through a midlife crisis in my mid-20s. So I just went early. And I realized later that coined little phrase that I learned to understand what happened is the fact that, how in a movie or you see like you hear reports about gang shootings, or in a movie there's a case of mistaken identity, right? We hear this and this happened and it was a tragic thing. So the Lord helped me see, I believe Jesus showed me this through the Spirit on my morning walks of meditation well after the Afghanistan stuff, was taken. I took on the identity of my parents by conditioning alone, because science says that we're conditioned by the time we're 8 years old, pretty much completely in our subconscious. So we're going to repeat these patterns of other people. And then we get to be adulthood living our own lives. And we start developing all this discontentment maybe about, I'm doing this, but I don't want, there's no resonance, right? We're misaligned. And for me to be able to understand that it goes into our identity, I had a former pastor who said, many people have found healing and freedom and peace and comfort in Jesus, but very few have ever discovered their own identity in him. And when he told me that, this was in 2016, I heard that. I still had many years to go till we get, obviously 8, since then 9. It's like this idea of mistaken identity began me on a path of the darkest hour of my whole life, which actually lasted 4 years. That's the foundation. So I don't know. I'll take a breath. I don't know if you have any questions.
Yeah.
About
Okay.
that.
So let's talk about that identity thing a little bit more. Maybe you can unpack that what the pastor said. People find peace and joy in Jesus, but don't find their identity in him. Is that to say they cannot find their identity in him, or people fall short of finding their identity in him? Kind of unpack that for me a little bit.
What a loaded question.
Just trying to set you up.
I look at this simply, but not simplistically.
Sure.
It begins with that 0 to 8. There's no way around the fact that God made us as creatures that other people have used their gifts and wherewithal to help us understand this thing called psychology. The way, in general, the human being is going to work in relation to their mind, body, and spirit, and the expression of that on the outside.
Yeah.
So as that goes, we're going to get conditioned by the people who raised us, who loved us, the authority figures around us. And there's some that have abuse, and we know this, we know that is there. So this conditioning that occurs, it's going to form a way of seeing the world. It's going to form that perspective, as some of us call it, or other people say worldview if they get fancy.
Yep.
I get to the point where, and I use myself because it's a really good, bad example. I had all the skills. I had the IQ to do it. I had the wherewithal to do it, and the abilities. Even the desire at first, because I kind of didn't know the road that was ahead of me. So I get into this place where I'm misaligned with my core values of what I believe. It didn't happen in a way like, oh, I see my dad beating my mom, because he was never physically abusive. But I did watch him drink a lot and then go to bed, because he was a truck driver. He was always working really hard to provide. And, it was 4 to 6 Budweisers at night with my mom on the couch. Not a bad guy. That was his pattern. I didn't fall into alcoholism, but I fell into other addictive patterns that I didn't understand. But I also I'm like, I'm not okay with this. Why can't I escape it? I'm not okay with, and I'll go on a really practical side of just vocational stuff, having jobs and businesses. I was not okay, as I've read in finance books, trading my time to get money from somebody else's paycheck. So I go to a workplace, I give them my hour, and they give me a dollar amount for that hour. This is pretty standard for the vast majority of us with jobs, W-2s, and some 1099s. When I saw that, this is a small example. I was, in my soul to this day, that is contrary to what I was built for. It doesn't mean that it was something that I didn't have to prepare with, but I didn't know that back then. So my perception, this is one of the things that is in my materials where I say perception is direction. In my early 20s, I would have said that's nonsense, because people would say reality or perception is reality. And I'm like, no, it's not. Jesus is Lord is reality and truth is truth. And I would get super, you know how that goes. You get a bit militant in your zealousness, right? I was saved at 20 years old. I did not grow up around anything church or nothing like that. So for me, after I get saved, Jesus starts showing me things internally. I like this. I don't like that. Contrast. And it was part of that where I realized I wasn't meant to go down that road. And then when I started mentioning these things to my hardcore blue collar dad, he's like, you're just irresponsible, lazy, and on track to be a loser is what you are. And I'm like, yeah, maybe I am. So now I'm reinforcing the 0 to 8 stuff, the teasing, the raising through some shame, like his generation did, baby boomers. You know, no offense, guys, but that's how a lot of them raised us. And so it set me in a path of conflict internally that led to, as when I was in the hospital, of responding. I didn't have any of these ideas in my mind about, if you want to change your life, you can actually change your life. Or if you want to, you can set priorities and you can live by them, and you can reject other things that don't fit. Even those concepts were never shown to me. So what did I do? I jumped back to my San Antonio days in the Army, Fort Sam Houston, and I start the promiscuity road all over again. Only now I got a baby that's coming in 7 months with my wife, my new wife of a year. And I start down that road, which within a very short time, I started opiate abuse in order to numb the betrayal that I was doing that I did not believe in. I'm not, there's big complex stories to this, but in the gist was that I have core values. You have core values. If what we're doing with our daily life, our practical actions, is contrary to what we believe in our soul or what we feel we should have with a vision, it's going to cause a discontent and a frustration, even though most of us are probably having pretty decent lives.
So it's interesting that, a lot of the time you'll hear someone's story and it's, I was raised in this environment and then I did these things, right? It was the drugs, it was the other stuff. And then I met Jesus and then things changed and turned. I think a story we don't often talk about is the one that you just told, is I had this stuff happen in my life. Then I met Jesus. And then because of circumstances surrounding how I was living and the things that were happening and whatever, even though I had the opportunity to lean into who God made me to be and, identifying with Christ, that's our identity in Christ, right? It's identifying with his death, burial, resurrection, and victory. That's identity in Christ. Even though I had the opportunity to do that, I fell back to, what do we say in the military? You fall back to your level of training, right? I fell back to what I was kind of conditioned or trained to do. And it's interesting because, a lot of reasons, right? But the book of Romans tells us that we're not slaves to sin or old life anymore. However, we can make the decision to go back to that if we want to. And so I think a lot of people don't talk about that. They don't talk about the fact that they, as Christian people, as followers of Christ, make a decision to go back to that old life, that dead life, right?
Yep.
And it's really interesting to hear you talk about that because I think that's more people's story than the I was broken, I was hurt, I found Jesus, now everything's great. Like that's the story we like to tell, but that's not reality for most people. Most people, it's that up and down path that you just described.
Yeah, it is. And people talk about this phrase backsliding around the corporate church environment. And what you've seen as a senior pastor in your past, who knows, right? But anecdotally, I can sit here and tell you without having to do a study or a survey, when I'm at the baseball fields or the gymnastics arena or volleyball, or I'm out here or over there or in a law office doing client work, whatever, talking to my wife, her friends, her clients.
Yeah.
That's the story, what you just described. Way more common than anything else. Paul said, Paul himself, what I hate, I do.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that Paul looked like he had a pretty good upbringing, the way he was set up and given to the right mentors and the right coaches.
Sure.
It's like, who knows, but why did he do that? There's a conditioning that happens in all of us. And there's so much, when I look at death, burial, and resurrection, that popped out into my mind, and the Spirit's holding on to that one in me right now for a reason, I think. And there's so much more, and I don't have all the answers on this. I got a handful of things that have come out of my path that say there's so much more to our identity in Jesus. What is identity in Jesus? That's still ethereal. It's still like, what does that mean? Ambiguous.
Right.
To me anyway, it's like, I was watching your five priorities of a testimony when you share them, your latest episode. And it really caught my eye because I'm like, man, I want to make sure I'm aligned for your audience, right? For the March or Die audience. And so I'm like, what are the top priorities that this guy thinks? So I get on there and I'll mention two quick ones. The number one priority was when you use number 4 that you mentioned was, and I won't give number 5. People can go watch that if they want to figure it out. But number 4, give us proper perspective of our own place or our own role, right?
Yeah.
That I put a really big asterisk on because for me, I think that people who haven't gotten that awareness level yet about how good and how for you and each of us that God actually is, he's like, this is not some entity who's waiting to correct us or slap us crack us with a whip. To keep us in line. His priority, his heart for us is not for us to be in line. That's not his priority. His priority with us is intimacy. It's connection. It's walking, laughing, crying, sometimes getting in an attitude and having an argument. It's all in the New Testament. It's all there. The identity means, what is knowing your place? And I love the way that you said it's not about making you less.
Right.
That's a worldly idea. That's a condemnation idea. And what I know in my own personal experience, doing these early morning walks with the Lord so much over so many years, trying to figure this stuff out. Why? Because an old Marine colonel at the VA told me that I was going to be stuck with these demons inside forever that I came back with.
Yeah.
And it wasn't weeks later when I said, wait a second. you're not my authority in this life. I appreciate you. I love you. I had a good time with him. I don't have to accept that. And as a matter of fact, I reject it. And so I made a decision that day, some years ago, that I was going to thrive with post-traumatic stress. And I was also going to stop calling it a disorder, because I don't have a disorder anymore.
Right.
And I'm thriving with my Lord on the path that I was supposed to go down. And so back to that, I look at my place, my role. If anything, when we understand the spot he puts us in and says, here, go do what I built you to do in the way that you're going to do it, governed by me and my spirit. Like, when you do that, the freedom that you bust into, the weight that falls off your shoulder, to stop being attached to other people's thoughts, concerns about your life. There's an artist, Kevin Burgess, who's KB in the rap world. And this dude's like, he's got a master's or a PhD in theology, whatever he's got. But he's an awesome dude. And he lives over here in St. Pete, not too far. And he says, my wife's happy. Jesus loves me. Nothing else to conform to. And I love the way he says that, because it's a simplistic version of our role. And when you understand your role, it's like being in a film. I love movies. You don't have to be any other thing that you're not.
Yeah.
And mistaken identity causes us to do those things. Yeah. I show up clean shaven. Why? Because the workplace wants me to look a certain way. I get it. I'm not knocking these things individually. I'm saying that we should be more intentional, intense intentionality, like my neighbor calls me, intensely intentional about the things that we're expressing on a practical basis, because if they're misaligned, man, we go back. We go backwards.
So how did you, promiscuity, drugs, I know eventually you and your wife separated. Talk about the process of coming back, or maybe, coming to your place for the first time, however you view that. How did you move beyond that?
Along my path, he showed me, I had to go through and look at what he had done. And I started putting these pieces together very prayerfully, very intentionally. And he showed me these 7 pillars. Everybody's going to have a framework about everything else. This is what he showed me. 7 pillars of revolutionary freedom. We don't need to get into them all. The first 2 will answer your question. Number 1, that's where the perception is direction came from. So what he showed me is there's this path, the identity path, how perception is formed. I call it the behind the scenes construction of your perception. It's how you see things. If you see someone cut you off on the highway, you're going to have a certain reaction. Most of us, we know what it is. Others of us, we're going to immediately have a thought of, oh, shoot, first of all, safety. I'm not offended first. I'm going to reach safety first. I'm going to back up a little bit. I'm not going to hit the horn or the lights, because that doesn't cross my mind first, because I'm not antagonistic or even violently responsive at first. What I'm at first, I'm so full of whatever the Lord's been showing me that now I'm like, my kid's there. You okay? Yeah, he's good. And I look, he goes, why would they do that? I said, well, first of all, people are crazy. We already know this. But second of all, that dude might have just had a blowout fight with his wife.
Who knows? Yeah, that's right.
We just go down a handful of scenarios. We don't know. But that's also a worldview to learn, a skill to develop that reaction instead of, right? And coming off Afghanistan for the first several years, I wanted to fight everybody on the road. It wasn't because I was violent. It was because I was freaked out thinking everybody was trying to hurt us.
Right.
And that lasted a long, long time. So how does it happen? It happened because I made a decision after that Marine colonel told me, you're going to be stuck with this forever. I made a decision to thrive. One of the first things that I teach people is like, when we do the coaching is, where do you get a handful of things where you're like, I hate that I do that? Or this repeated pattern that you would get rid of if you had the wherewithal, if you could get rid of it. Wave your wand, it's gone. What would it be? Okay, so we start working on that. When does it happen? We go down these paths, and the Lord showed me under perception, the second one is power. And the reason we lose power, our personal power that we're supposed to walk in, our holy ordained power, is because we're giving it to the terrorists. We're giving it to the pastor. We're giving it to the guy who cut us off. We're pointing fingers and saying, if it wasn't this way, my parents never taught me about money. That's why I'm broke. My mom had a revolving door of men. That's why my marriage is, I'm on number 6. It's like, you have to first decide what you want. Like, that's really it, right? Jesus with the guy with the mat. What do you want? Oh, I've been hitting here for 30 years. That's not what I asked you. What do you want?
Right.
I try to get into the pool to get healed, but everybody gets in there first. It's not what I asked you. So what do you want? And I'm like, I don't want to like get this far to get this far.
Yeah.
And so for me, the number one driver actually for me personally was the fact that all my little episodes over the years, or some big ones, they started conditioning my wife to paranoia. And then the household energy was ugly, rough. Yeah. And this is with people who follow Jesus. We're not beating our kids and yelling all the time over here, even though I yelled too much. And even then, I'm like, do I want to be a yeller? I got conditioned by a Detroit yeller. I don't want to be a yeller. So that was contrast. I said, I don't want to be a yeller. I'm going to work on it. And then these tools. And then the first one that, and I'd be glad to give it to everybody, is radar. And radar is an acronym. You can't really see it very well here, but RADAR. It's reflection, awareness. The D is squared. You got to determine, and I'll show you this real quick. Determine, and then you decide. And deciding means not what people think. This isn't choosing glazed or chocolate here. This is like when a decision occurs, your life is irrevocably different. Then you make an adjustment and then you repeat. So what do? I reflected. I'm yelling here. This is what happens to my wife. Now I'm becoming aware of this situation that used to be just a reaction. That was subconscious. Now I'm paying attention to it. So I have this awareness. I'm determining the effects. Okay, in this case, it's the effect on my wife, and that's the effect of our intimacy, and we know that domino chain. By the way, it's been 17 years since she remarried me, and this next month, we're going to have 27 all together. And if we don't count the divorce and separation time, we're at 23 years marriage on Pearl Harbor Day on the 7th.
Wow.
So that is what Jesus does when you turn back to him and answer the question of what do you want? What do you want? And I'm like, I want that same awesome life I always wanted before all this nonsense happened.
Yeah.
And so he's like, all right, let's go get it. So, but there's gonna, right. And so then you make the adjustment, or you decide, I'm not going to be a yeller. I love my dad. I love all the people I came from. I'm not going to be that way in that one area. My kids don't need to get conditioned by that, because why? Because my grandkids are going to start coming around in within 10 years. And I don't want them getting conditioned as yellers too.
Right.
So I make the adjustment. How do I make the adjustment? It's all the self-awareness stuff that gets into the minutia of coaching, right? Like these types of things, and you got to catch it. It's a lot of work. It's diligence. And then from there, the last R is repeat. And like I say, it's not grandpappy's factory line repetition. The Navy SEALs military training knows this better than anybody. You iterate every single rep. What does that mean? Every time you do it again, you look for a small incremental way to make it better than it was the last time.
That's good.
When you do that over time, we got Revamp Your Vision. That's another small a program and a workbook that I have for these people to get their purpose in line and get clarity on their vision. And then the 7 pillars is the Hallmark framework that I use in my coaching. But that repetition is everything. If you're working out and you're doing reps on the bench and you're not watching your form with every rep, my wife beats this into my head. She's a trainer. Every single rep, like you're not going to maximize your growth. You're not going to maximize your strength or your stability. It's no different spiritually. Man,
there's so much there. And
so much.
Before we jump off, I want you to point everyone to your resources and even coaching and that kind of thing. So they'll have access to that. But before we get there, you're wearing a shirt, Hope Dealer, right?
Yes.
All right.
Don't forget to talk about this.
Someone's sitting across the table from you.
Yes.
And they say, Adam, my story is whatever it is. Everybody has a story. And I'm at the place where I just don't feel like I can move forward anymore. And this is, I talk about this in kind of 2 lanes, right? Like in our world, in the veteran world, there are, more than 20 veterans every single day decide to take their lives. It's a crazy thing, right? But they get to that point for whatever reason, and we could deconstruct that, where they decide they can't move forward physically anymore. But I would argue that many, many, many more people have come to that same point emotionally and spiritually, relationally, where they're existing, but they've lost hope. And so they're just going through the motions. They're they're continuing only to the extent that they have to get to the next thing, but there is no real life in them.
Yep.
What do you say to that person? I'm coming to you, Adam. I don't have hope anymore. I'm done. I can't do this anymore. What do you say to me?
Once we catch up and do our small talk and all these things, I'm going to trust that you're feeling my heart, and I'm going to hit you with a very direct question. Do you want it to change?
Yeah.
And I don't let them answer either. Not right away.
Yeah.
I cut them off. Don't answer that. Just throw the seed in their face, right? Let it land in their forehead. Because they're going to react. Who's not going to give a reactive answer? Of course, I want it to change. It sucks.
Yeah. Yes. That's why I'm asking.
Right. If you did, I wouldn't be the first attempt.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't want to be too hard. No, but then, because it's military, right? We go straight for it. But this is what I'll say. The guy that helped me come out of the drug world while I was 4 weeks away from my divorce when I had a conversation with a man who led to the fact that I'm probably sitting here with you today.
Wow.
And that man, never military, but he had lost his first family, his first wife to alcoholism, and moved out of the house when his kids were 7, 8 years old. He was 15. He's 15 years older than me. Yeah. And he asked me a handful of questions like this, and he put a challenge to me about being a man. Let's just put it that way. And one of the things that he had me do was gain some clarity. And in that clarity, and this is what I would offer to this person sitting at a Starbucks or in the church lobby or in the alley or in their car with their gun in their hand at the VA freaking parking lot. Why do I say that? Because a friend and a veteran and a husband, my age, 45 years old, 11 weeks ago, this is messenger messages with his wife. Yep. He was at work, Tampa detective, and he ended his own life. Yeah. Army veteran, one of the happiest, strongest, best men you would ever know in your life, Tim White. And this is this morning. And I had to send her a little bit of encouragement. The next guy, and this is feeding the point. I know that I got another brother that is in the Army right now. He's in uniform doing encouraging messages on Facebook. Mm-hmm. And I saw the energy didn't match necessarily the inspirational verses or the message. And I'm like, this dude's going through something heavy. And so I said, I've never talked to him before 2 weeks ago. I knew him through his wife, my wife. Last night, unprovoked, haven't talked in a week. I said, hey, praying for you, brother. Praise hands. This morning, 8:49 a.m. Thank you. I'm not going to say her name. Yeah. She filed a petition for divorce against me. This is now. He's the second one in my life that's involved in my stuff it's coming to me. Yep. And this is what I'm having these guys do. You said in that episode from yesterday that when you have a testimony to give, the enemy's going to we defeat the enemy with our testimony. Right. This session on this podcast, as I'm trying to get my camera back, he's going to try to do these things because the testimony is saving lives. And I'm just one of many. It's just my role. Yep. But here's what I know. You got to define what you want to do. What do you want? And I talked with Nikki, and this was after we were divorced. My wife, what do you want? Yeah. If this could happen, if we could have this amazing, beautiful, fun, sexy, prosperous lifestyle in God, helping people, raising amazing kids, generational family business, would you want it? If it was even possible, would you say yes to it? Yep. She said yes. I said yes. I asked, I'm not going to bust out, someone very close in my life. I asked that same question to a year or two after that the Lord healed us. And that person in my life said, no, I want to go with my affair and leave my spouse. Yep. I'm like, wow, super close to me, by the way, super close. Yeah. Define. You got to define what you want. From there, you can't think of how, because if you could think of the how, you wouldn't need God. Yeah. Yeah. Jesus brings the miracle. He brings the healing. He changes the hearts. Yep, that's right. With these two men that are on the verge of losing everything with their family, their wives, I'm telling them, we're praying for changed hearts now. You've already damaged her through neglect. Yeah. Forget that. She doesn't like you right now. And it's not final until it's final, because Lazarus was dead for 3 days. And Jesus let him die, and it wasn't outside his purview of control. Right. Figure out what you want. You got to learn from somebody who can help you get it. That's the second step that Don taught me. And then you have to do what they did. You have to do some form of a thing. And the more somebody understands their role, the more they're going to give you guidance with principles and allow the Spirit to take you along that path in your way.
Yeah, that's good.
That's one of the biggest strengths that came out of my material and my path, was the fact that the second small thing that you mentioned, I want to say this for your people, is the fact that rehearsing my story as you say it, rehearsing it, has encouraged me so much, because it was not a straight line to get here.
Yep. Right.
Many, many, many doubts. Many, like, I thought we were.
Yeah.
So define, learn, and do.
That's
you
good,
can
man.
start that today.
That's good.
Define. Don't try to write out the whole vision of your life. We got revamp your vision over here. For right now, it's one thing. And it's the thing that's bringing the most significant pain in your life. And I guarantee you, you are not aligned with your internal beliefs, with your outside state, your actions. I guarantee it. I don't have to know you.
Yeah.
It's human nature. It's how we are as mind, body, spirit creations. If you want it, you can get it.
Yeah.
But he's got to take you there. You got to walk with him to go there.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's a disconnect sometimes between, there's kind of like I won't put a label on it, but there's this one side that says, it's all about Jesus, and it's only through the power of, the Holy Spirit and the work of God in you. That's the only way anything good happens. I believe that. And that is a true statement. I believe it. But then there's the other side that says you need to make a decision, you need to take the right steps, you need to put these principles in place. And I believe that too. And I don't think they're in conflict. No. I think I have a responsibility to do everything that God has allowed me to do and equipped me to do, and put the right people around me, the multitude of counselors, their safety. Without faith, we can't please God. Like, all of these things are true. And so it's only because of Jesus, but I believe we limit the work of God in our lives when we're not willing to steward over the opportunities, resources, and, whatever he's given to us. So it is both.
I would like to jump into the nuance of that briefly, because, and maybe you'll agree, maybe you won't. I want to push back a little on the concept of just semantically, the word only. I believe, because the Bible says faith without works is dead, and we demonstrate our faith by our works, that our works really matter, and we're actually going to be judged by them, the Bible says.
Sure.
So, and we will receive accordance to what we've done here in the body.
Sure.
And so if that's true, then it can't be only Jesus.
Yeah.
I believe only he can bring about the change. Only he can bring about the transformation, the removing of the scales, the changed heart. I do believe that's a work of God alone.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's similar to faith in science.
Yeah.
He created science. They're not in conflict.
They're not in conflict. I just had that conversation with my teenage son the other day. They're not in conflict. Yeah. Yeah. That's right. And I would say to the only, I think this is why I love Hebrews 11:6. Without faith, it is impossible to please God. Why is that true? It's true because if our confidence is not in what God can do beyond our ability, then we'll only ever be as good as we can be. So we're limiting ourselves by ourselves, right? So it's only as God does the work that only God can do in our lives, but their lives yielded to his work, that we're fully able to accomplish what he's set in front of us. And so I believe it's only through the power of the Holy Spirit that we're able to fully become what God has created us to be. But we only get to that point when we're willing to trust him by faith, put our confidence in him, and take those steps even when we can't see the end from the beginning. So it's 100%, right? It's 100% both. And when we say it's like, well, it's 90 this or 80 that or 50-50, no, it's 100% both. You need to 100% lean in to what God has called you and created you to be, trusting him to do more than you could possibly think or imagine. And that's exactly right. Yeah, it's good, man.
You're probably looking at any more time for a quick story?
Yeah, good.
So this little wooden tiki guy, I got this in the Dominican Republic a few years back for a birthday and anniversary trip, all combined into one with my wife. And in that, one day we went, and here's the reason. we went walking down from the hotel to a little shop in the bazaars and all the little tents and little knickknacks, flea market looking thing, right? In Dominican Republic. Now, I didn't realize that walking up, I got triggered. I didn't know it yet. It was below my awareness. We'll just say it wasn't on my radar.
Right. Right.
That's why it got its name, by the way. It wasn't on its radar or my radar. We're there. It wasn't a half an hour. It was fine. The guys were cute, or they were pleasant to my wife. It was a cute setup. They got the dolls. They got the clothes. It was very nice. Everything was good. But while she's shopping, I stuck back in between a couple buildings by a bathroom. I almost called it a latrine. By the bathroom. But again, it's Dominican Republic. We're not talking the streets of South Beach here or Vegas, right?
Yeah.
So it's looking like what I remembered as Afghanistan in some of the shops along the roads and these different things. I did not connect that at the time. He gives us each one of these, said, here, give you a free sample. Then she's buying some other knickknacks. I start getting anxious there, and I'm getting vigilant, right? I'm looking around. I'm in the corners by the wall. I'm looking up and down the little alleys, and I'm waiting for her to be having some kind of trouble so I can step in and help her.
Yeah.
That comes from my nightmares, by the way. So after that, we start walking the mile back to the beach or to the hotel, and I'm getting more and more ramped up inside, paranoia, anxious, bad. And I start shaking. I got the goosebumps coming all right now. We get back to the hotel, and I'm letting her know now, hey, I'm tripped up here. I hit the tripwire. It's over. I'm in it. And she goes, okay, what do we need to do? I said, just nothing. Just stand here. We're standing in the aqua blue, warm paradise waters up to our thighs. And I said, I just need to hold your hand. I grabbed her hand, and I'm white knuckling her knuckles, right? Without hurting her, I'm gripping. And she's a strong woman. So, and tears falling, and I'm just trying to breathe, and we're trying to get through it. I'm not brand new to it at that point. I'm like, we're gonna get through it. That wrecked the next 36 hours. It took us 36 hours to get back. By that point, we landed on my actual birthday, which was the 21st of May, and we're over, and we're like, and I'm getting better. But it took out a couple of days of this beautiful vacation, and it set her into a place that was from before. Right. The eggshells, the not knowing what's going on. Right. Why is my husband different? The long and short of it, after we left there, I remembered seeing this thing after we got home. And I don't remember all the different people in the Old Testament that set up their altars, but I know Lot did. Yeah. And about the place where you get to look what God has done. They set up an altar to remember. I wear this, and I keep it in different places when I go in public. I wear it less and less these days. But from that trip, I got this thing. I said, I'm going to wear this. And here's my commitment. I'm never, ever, as far as it's in my control, going to have another panic attack as long as I live. Yeah. Now, have I gotten close? I have. I got 2 instances in the last 3 years or so since then where I got close with anxiety, never lost control, never tripped. Now, why? I made that decision. Shortly after that, I keep going out, iterating on the morning walks, analyzing these interactions throughout my day with my kids and other people. And it was right after that, I was sitting at the kitchen table. My wife's making spaghetti dinner. And he goes, the Spirit says, I'm writing on paper. How did this happen? Blah, 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 blah. Yeah. And the Spirit's like, it happened because it wasn't on your radar. And I'm like, ding, like a stove ding, right? Ding. And I'm like, oh my gosh, radar. And I started writing. And then the framework was there. And really, have you ever heard, this is the whole point of this for your people. Have you ever heard of the phrase Hokmah?
I don't think so.
Hokmah. You're going to find various definitions because it's quite antiquated. It's an ancient Aramaic word, which is the precursor to the Hebrew language. And in there, I'm sure you know that. telling the pastor something. But there's
Hokmah, a lot I don't know.
In Hokmah, the definition that stuck in my spirit that the Lord has me running with is essentially the mission of my life. And that is helping others who have ears for what this guy's got to say in the way that I bring it. It's the skillful art of walking with the Lord. Skillful and artful. It's both and. It's science and faith. It's both. And in there, everything that I've gone on, right now we're doing a thing called roll call. And it's called roll call because I love the military analogies and they just work for me and the guys that I serve well. And believe it or not, like 80% on my podcast are women, but it's so bizarre, but probably for their men, right? It's like, we're taking the family back. We're helping maximize men. And the way that I do it, teaching the skillful art of walking with the Lord, is doing it in a bit of more of a street way. And Radar is the tool that the Lord gave me so I can give this away to others to learn how to, you can call it a method of prayer. You can call it how to be aligned with the Lord throughout the day as a method for that. But at the end of the day, on the practical side, for let's say a more worldly person, this is how to self-coach yourself into higher awareness. And at the same time, if you're a believer in the Lord, you're a mind, body, spirit. Now we're doing both. And we can use this to figure out sports schedules and who can do rides when. Oh, that's too much for me. I have my work schedule. Radar adjusts everything because nothing slips under the radar anymore, and you catch it before it sabotages you.
Yep.
So Hakma, I know that was a lot.
That
was supposed to be a brief story, but yeah.
It's good, man. Where, Adam, can people follow you, find the resources that you produce, get ready for that book to come out? Where do you want people to go?
Right now I have honed in. I appreciate the opportunity as well. So I've honed in on, and this is a leading from the Lord. I know that it probably cuts down on how many people get exposed to me a bit, but I think that the ones who come to me, it's going to be a bit more narrow, and we're going to be able to go a lot deeper together.
Yeah.
So they choose.
Yeah.
It's up to them. But the bottom line is, right now, what I want to say is, aside from the call and the 7 pillars and this workbook and that workbook, if this is resonating with your people, I'd like to offer them 30 to 45 minutes of my time to have a conversation, which would be an honor for me as well, because they choose to give their 30 to 45 to me.
Sure. And
if we can have a little conversation to see where they're at, I'd love to point them to whatever tool is most appropriate. Our roll call is beginning. Actually, our next one is November 24th, the Sunday before Thanksgiving. This is a 60-minute bi-monthly phone call or Zoom with a hand-selected group of men. So it's roll call for men. But outside of what I would like to offer is just say, hey, chat.adamkasix.com.
Good.
Free call. Get in there, get a discovery session, pick whatever you want, shoot the breeze, chop it up. I don't care what you pick. Just get in there, grab a chop it up session, a discovery session. You'll go on my calendar. And from there, let's have a conversation, because I have a bunch of my own resources. I love giving them away. I love charging for them. It's all great. But at the same time, I have a plethora of other resources, because only that many who cross my path are going to fit for me to work with.
Sure.
And for them to receive from me, right? So, but I think the way to go is a call. If this message is resonating, chat.adamkasix.com right now. Like, it's easy. Calendar, pick your time, let's chat, and let's just go from there. If nothing else, you'll have an acquaintance in your back pocket you can trust.
That's good, man. Adam, I appreciate it. In spite of, we both had camera problems today. We've had all kinds of issues, but that doesn't matter. We got through it. And man, I appreciate you and look forward to doing this again. I'm sure we will. So thanks for what you're doing. Keep it up.
Thank you. March or die. Take the step.
That's it.
Take the step.
That's it, man. Thank you.
Right on, brother. Thank you. God bless you.
Grateful for that episode. Man, that interview is just, it was one of those interviews, and I have this a lot. It happens a lot. We have great people on. One of those interviews, I could have continued having that conversation for a lot longer. And Adam and I are already talking about ways that we can work together and continue conversations like this. So be on the lookout. But for now, go and check out his website and check out the work that he does. He offered at the end of the episode an opportunity for you to have a chat with him. And he's got so many great resources and it, helps in the coaching world. Just helping people understand who they are, who they're created to be, and how they can move forward. So please go and check that out. That will be a help and a blessing to you. When you're done with this, take some time, go to lifeaudio.com, find those great podcasts there, and you will be happy that you did. Again, thank you so much for joining me today. I look forward to talking to you next time.